About 15 years ago, I was sacked and fired by my employer. Not for gross misconduct, but I was fired because I acquired disability on the job. For the first 5 years, it was tormenting, troublesome for me. But after that, I decided that I'm going to admit that I am blind. After all, it wasn't my fault to be. It was as a result of the poor medical and negligence of our health workers. I decided to go for rehabilitation. And after that, I made an attempt that let me job hunt again. But for every single attempt, the employers within the Nigerian society would say no. What they are seeing is my inability to see. They aren't seeing my possibilities to contribute. But this is not about me, Rasak, alone. There are millions of persons with disabilities that you, watching right now, have discriminated from contributing in the economy because you see persons with disabilities as those who are incapacitated. Let me talk about the data. Globally, there are about 1 billion people with disabilities across the world. 80% of them live in developing countries like Africa. In Africa particularly, there are about 80 million people with disability. 22 million of them are youths under the age of 35. Africa is an evolving and emerging continent. Every part of the world wants to leverage in having Africans within their workforce. But whenever they think about that, they think about diversity from the point of gender, youth, race. But unfortunately, you don't think about people with disability within the context of a diversity. You don't see them as people who will contribute to your companies, to economic growth, to social development. Now, let me shock you. Globally, $6 trillion is lost to social exclusion of people with disability. What did I say? $6 trillion. Let me share this. According to the World Bank data, we could increase our economical gross domestic product between 3 to 8% when we include people with disabilities in our social, in our education, in terms of our facility, in terms of our economic activities. Having said this, I'm sure you want to tap into the benefit of people with disability in what you do. If yes or no, can you say hi? Do you want to tap into it? All right. Before you go there, let's talk about those things that you need to do to tap into the economic contribution of people with disability. In the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working from Nairobi to Abuja, Lagos to Accra, working with different nationals and transnational companies. And I have seen 3 things that we need to keep at the back of our mind. The first thing we must keep, if we need that, is that we must understand that we need to enable access for people with disabilities. Access in terms of our physical infrastructure, access to information, access in our buildings, access in what we do. The second point I've come to realize that we must put in place is the cultural transformation. You, right now, you have a lot of unconscious biases about people with disability. Your unconscious bias is that if I ask you to define disability, you would define people with disability as those who cannot walk, who cannot see, who cannot do, who cannot. And everything you see is from the point of cannot. And as a result of that, your attitude is that they can't do and they should not be given that opportunity. The third point is the institutionalization process. And when we look at that, the fact is that a lot of time, there's a misconception about the skills and the scope of talent of people with disability vis-a-vis the cost that it might put you to make sure you have an inclusive work environment. But let me take this a bit back. you realize that a lot of times, perhaps you as a woman, you want to fight for a position in your organization. Just think about this. When somebody tells you, ordinary woman is competing with me, how do you feel? Good or bad? Thank you. The word ordinary might not mean anything, but at that moment, the person is actually telling you or demeaning you, making you feel inferior. These are some of the cultures. So when we think about people with disability, the point is that enabling access gives us opportunity for meaningful participation. An inclusive culture brings about contribution within the workforce. Having said this, let's now talk about those things that we are losing as a result of not including people with disability. There is a high rate of labor migration out of Africa, japa.com. Everybody want to japa, right? And it has its own effect on our economy. But what research have shown us is that people with disabilities are not part of those labor migrants who are rushing out of Africa. Every time companies spend a lot of money conducting induction for people as a result of labor migration within companies in Africa, having people with disabilities in your workforce could help you reduce that by 40%. The second point is a research conducted by Accenture called the Accenture Disability Advantage Report in 2018. The Accenture report says that they look at companies that are disability confident and those that are not disability confident and did a kind of comparison. What that research showed is that those companies that are much disability confident have a double net income, a 28% increase in revenue, and a 30% increase in profit margin than those companies that are not disability confident. The causal effect of this was attributed to three things. One, the innovation that comes from people with disabilities when they are part of economic contribution and workforce. The two is the productivity of people with disability. And the third one is the market share of the families of people with disability. Without mentioning any company name, I had once worked with a company that produced non-alcoholic and alcoholic drink within East Africa. What the company did is to have what we call inclusive value chain. They bring farmers with disabilities to supply sorghum directly into their companies. As a result of this, the company were able to say that a lot of people in the society see them as people who are much interested, not just in the elites, but also in the people who are living within the rural areas. They saw the company as that these are the companies that are much inclusive, and that actually contributed to their market share within the society. That will take me to the third point. 1 out of every 5 Africans are Nigerians. But we did what we called a UK algorithm with Nigerian adult consumers of 100 million adult consumers we have in Nigeria. The statistics reveal that 10% of the 100 million people would likely have one form of physical or mobility impairment. 3% of adult consumers in Nigeria do have one form of visual impairment, like myself. 4% of adult consumers in Nigeria do have what we call hearing impairment. Now, let's picture this. I'm sure you can picture the way our banks are structured in Nigeria. Picture the entrance of the doors of our bank and imagine how a wheelchair user will be able to go in there. That means Nigerian banks are losing 10% of adult consumers who have mobility impairment because they do not make their infrastructure accessible. Think about this. The online platform, when you and I do our shopping, is not accessible with screen readers for those who are blind. That means the online shopping companies are losing 3 million people who would have likely participate or be able to use their platform. I think it's becoming much clearer to you now that if we could include people with disabilities, there is opportunity for your company, for everybody to contribute to economic development. But I think there's affected us. And that adage is that there is ability in what? Can we say it together? But that is not going to work anymore. People don't pay you and I for our ability. They pay us for our productivity. So let's replace the word productivity with ability. Thank you very much.